The sky over Velithra burned with a strange violet hue, casting long shadows over jagged rocks and broken metal. The planet had been scarred by centuries of war, and now its deserts were littered with ruins, remnants of once mighty cities and battlefields where thousands had fallen. Among these ruins, a single human soldier woke, his body aching, his vision blurred, and a strange sense of isolation pressing against him. Ethan Cole had been captured, dragged from the wreckage of a human transport ship by the Velithran Dominion, a race of tall, silver-skinned warriors with eyes that glowed like liquid starlight. Ethan's wrists were bound with metallic restraints that hummed faintly with alien energy, and his legs ached from hours of marching. He took a deep breath and scanned his surroundings. The prison cell was small, with walls that pulsed faintly in violet light. There was no window to the outside, only a faint shimmer in the floor that suggested advanced energy barriers. Despite the alien technology surrounding him, Ethan's mind remained clear. He had trained for situations like this, being outnumbered, isolated, and tested beyond human limits. Fear could slow him down, but it would not break him. The door to the cell opened with a hiss, and in walked Commander Lyrae. She was unlike any warrior Ethan had seen. Her silver skin glimmered in the light, and her luminous eyes seemed to pierce through him, searching for weakness. She moved with precision, every step deliberate, like a predator assessing prey. Her presence was commanding. The air seemed to bend around her authority. She was the daughter of the Velithran Queen and the Dominion's most feared warrior. "You are far from your home, human," she said, her voice melodic yet sharp. "I have seen many of your kind. You all crumble in fear when faced with the Dominion's strength. So tell me, why aren't you afraid?" Ethan met her gaze steadily. He could feel the tension in the room, the power emanating from her. Most creatures would have shivered, whispered, or screamed. But he did none of those things. Instead, he replied simply, "Because fear doesn't help me survive." The words hung in the air. Lyrae blinked once, her luminous eyes narrowing. She had expected panic, tears, maybe even defiance born of ignorance. But calmness? That was unusual. Almost unheard of among humans. She leaned closer, studying him. "Do you not understand your situation? One word from me and your life could end in agony. Do you not feel fear?" Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, but his expression remained steady. "I feel fear, but I do not let it control me." For a moment, silence filled the cell. Lyrae turned and left, her footsteps echoing in the corridor. But she could not shake the image of the human who refused to act like a prisoner. Something about him unnerved her, sparked curiosity she had not experienced before. The next days were a test. Lyrae ordered her soldiers to expose Ethan to various forms of intimidation: the thundering war drums of the Velithran army, the psychic projections designed to induce terror, and even the Dominion's trained beasts, massive creatures with scales harder than metal. Each test was intended to break him, to reduce him to a trembling, pleading captive. Yet each time Ethan endured. He observed the effects on the soldiers, noting their reactions, sometimes even anticipating them. He did not lash out, nor did he beg. He remained calm, his eyes clear, his mind focused. Lyrae watched from a distance, her interest growing into something she could not name. One day, during a particularly brutal test, a Velithran beast was unleashed in the cell. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, and its teeth were sharp enough to tear through metal. Ethan did not flinch. When the creature lunged at him, he sidestepped, using the energy from the cell's barrier to nimbly roll aside. He did not attack the beast, but his calm maneuvering allowed it to charge past him, hitting the reinforced wall harmlessly. Lyrae's eyes widened. None of her prisoners had ever survived such a test without showing even the slightest tremor. She approached him after the beast was restrained and asked, "Why do you not even flinch?" Ethan shrugged lightly. "Fear is natural, but it is not useful if you let it dominate you. Understanding your surroundings, predicting outcomes, and staying calm. That keeps you alive." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. She did not smile, not in front of others, but for some reason she wanted to. Ethan's calmness, his resilience, and his quiet confidence were alien to her. She had been raised to believe that control came through fear and strength, and yet here was a human who seemed strong without needing either. A week passed. The Velithran camp outside the prison was alive with activity. Yet Ethan's mind remained focused. He observed patterns, learned guard routines, and memorized the layout of the prison. He also observed Lyrae, noting her curiosity and the subtle ways her authority wavered when he did not react as expected. Then, the camp came under attack. A rival alien faction descended upon them in sleek, dark ships, firing beams that tore through the desert landscape. Chaos erupted. Guards screamed orders, soldiers ran, and the camp's energy shields flickered. In the midst of the chaos, Ethan saw Lyrae caught beneath a collapsing support beam. Without thinking, he lunged forward, using all his strength to lift the beam enough for her to escape. Lyrae's eyes widened as she realized what had happened. He was injured, cuts and bruises already forming on his arms and legs, yet he did not cry out. He only looked at her and said, "Move. Get to safety." She stared at him, stunned. No human had ever risked their life for a Velithran warrior, let alone for her. Her mind struggled to process the contradiction. He should have been afraid, paralyzed, or desperate. Yet here he was, acting with courage and selflessness. When the battle subsided, she found herself walking beside him in the aftermath, though he was still shackled. The camp was in ruins, fires burning and smoke rising, yet Ethan's presence brought a sense of stability. Lyrae had never considered a human capable of such clarity and bravery. That night, she returned to the cell. Ethan sat quietly on the floor, examining the restraints, but not struggling. She approached, her voice softer than before. You are not like the others," she said, almost whispering. "I do not know if that terrifies me more than your defiance." Ethan looked up at her, his expression calm. "You don't need to fear me, Commander. Fear is for those who cannot act. I choose to act." Lyrae's thoughts were a storm. She had trained her entire life to command, to dominate, and to strike fear into others. And yet this human soldier challenged everything she believed, not with words but with presence, with unwavering calm and with courage. Over the next few days, she spent more time observing him. When the guards were distracted, she would ask him questions, not threats but simple questions about his people, his home, his choices. He spoke of Earth, of humans striving even in hopeless situations, of kindness and compassion as strengths, not weaknesses. She began to see a different kind of power, one that did not rely on fear or domination. Ethan's strength came from hope, from patience, and from seeing value in others, even enemies. She could not help but feel drawn to him, though she would never admit it aloud. One evening, after the dust from the previous attack had settled, Lyrae returned to his cell, her mind restless. "You speak of hope and courage," she said, leaning against the wall. "Do you not understand how fragile life is here? How easily you could die at any moment?" Ethan tilted his head slightly. "I understand. That is why I choose to focus on what I can do rather than what I cannot." Her eyes softened, though her pride would not allow her to show it fully. She studied him, realizing that this human, who should have been her prisoner and inferior, had something her people had long forgotten: the ability to rise above fear and act with integrity. That night, as she looked out over the violet sands from her quarters, she could not stop thinking about him. She had faced countless enemies, countless challenges, and yet none had unsettled her as much as this human who refused to be afraid. In the silence of the alien night, she whispered to herself, a confession she did not intend for anyone to hear. "He's not like the others, and I don't know if I can ignore that." Ethan, meanwhile, sat in his cell, quietly observing her patterns, her routines, and her expressions. He did not seek to manipulate her, nor did he harbor anger for his captivity. He simply understood that his survival depended not on fear, but on patience, observation, and sometimes the willingness to act when the moment demanded. And so, in a world of violet deserts, alien warriors, and endless conflict, two beings, one human, one Velithran, found themselves bound by circumstances neither could have anticipated. One stood in chains yet unbroken. The other stood free yet shaken by the presence of someone who defied everything she had been taught to fear. As the first violet sun of the morning rose over the jagged horizon, Ethan's calm eyes met Lyrae's uncertain gaze once more. "You will see," he said softly. "There is more strength in courage than in fear." For the first time, Lyrae wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, fear was not the only way to measure power. The Velithran Council had convened at dawn. Lyrae stood before them, her silver skin gleaming in the violet light, but her mind was elsewhere, on the human Ethan Cole, who had unsettled her in ways she could not name. The Council's orders were clear: extract the human's genetic data, learn what made humans resilient, and eliminate the prisoner. There was no room for hesitation, no allowance for doubt, yet Lyra hesitated. For days she had watched Ethan, noting his calmness in the face of fear, his quiet courage, and his strange way of seeing hope where others saw only danger. He had survived tests meant to break even the strongest Velithran, and when the camp was attacked by rival factions, he had risked his life to save her. He was a human, and yet he had acted with more bravery than most of her warriors ever would. As she walked back to the cell where Ethan was held, she felt a strange pull in her chest, a warmth she did not recognize. She opened the door and he was sitting cross-legged, eyes closed as if meditating. He opened them slowly and looked at her, calm as ever. "They will execute me," she said softly, her voice betraying a tension she had never allowed herself to feel. "If I follow their orders, you will die." Ethan tilted his head. "Then it is your choice, not mine. I will face what comes as I always have." Her chest tightened. Humans were strange creatures. They did not bow to fear. They did not bend to authority in the same way her people did. They measured courage differently, with their hearts, not just their strength. "Do you not fear them? Me?" He shook his head slowly. "Fear is a tool, not a master. I fear nothing that is meaningless. I act where action matters." Lyra's breath caught. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own principles falter. She had been raised to obey, to instill fear, to see every decision as a weapon. And now a human, fragile in comparison to her kind, had taught her that courage could come from choice, not just strength. Before she could answer, the alarms blared. The rival faction had returned, striking faster and harder than before. Cannons tore through the landscape and soldiers scrambled for cover. Lyra's council had left her little choice where she had to act. She turned to Ethan. "I cannot let them harm you. Follow me." He rose, still calm, and she quickly removed his restraints. "You should run," she said. He shook his head. "If I run, I leave the choice of survival to others. I survive best when I act." With that, they fled into the violet deserts, leaving the camp behind in chaos. The wind howled across the dunes, carrying the scent of ozone and scorched metal. Lyra led the way, her knowledge of the terrain helping them evade the Velithran reinforcements and the rival faction alike. Ethan followed closely, observing everything, learning patterns, calculating risks. During moments of brief rest, Lyra watched him. He tended to his minor wounds with careful precision, never complaining, never panicking. When she tried to speak, he would look at her calmly and say, "Your strength is in your choices, not just your power. Use it wisely." Her heart pounded in ways she could not explain. She had commanded armies, led missions, and fought countless battles. Yet she felt vulnerable in his presence. Not physically, but emotionally. He made her question everything she had believed about fear, control, and power. Days passed as they moved through the alien wilderness, avoiding patrols, hunting for water, and seeking shelter. Ethan's knowledge of survival, simple human ingenuity combined with observation, kept them alive. He taught Lyra small things like how to identify safe water from alien plants and how to predict weather patterns from the color of the violet sky. She listened, absorbed, and sometimes acted without thinking, relying on his guidance. One night, while they rested in the hollow of a rock formation, Lyra broke the silence. "Why do you trust me?" "I am supposed to be your captor." Ethan looked at her, his eyes reflecting the faint violet light. "Trust is not given because of rank or strength. It is given to those who choose to act with honor. You saved me as much as I saved you." She stared at him, words failing. His presence was a puzzle, a human mystery she could not solve. And yet, she wanted to understand, wanted to know what allowed him to face death and chaos with such calm clarity. The following day, they approached an abandoned fortress rumored to house ancient energy weapons. Lyra thought it might give them a chance to defend themselves if they were cornered. As they entered, Ethan paused, feeling the resonance of the energy flowing through the walls. "These ruins are old, but the energy patterns are intact," he said. "We can use them if necessary, but only if we respect the balance. A misstep could destroy us both." She nodded, impressed with his intuition. The fortress became their temporary refuge, a place to rest and plan. And during the quiet moments, Lyra found herself talking to him about things she had never shared with anyone. Her upbringing, the expectations of her people, and the burden of being a warrior trained to instill fear. Ethan listened without judgment, only offering insight in his calm, measured way. Then, as if the universe wanted to test them further, the Velithran reinforcements discovered their location. A squadron of soldiers surrounded the fortress, cutting off any escape. Lyrae drew her weapon instinctively, but Ethan stood beside her. "Do not fight out of fear," he said. "Fight because it matters." The battle was intense. Energy blasts shattered the ancient walls, and the violet sands outside were thrown into the air. Lyrae fought with precision, deflecting attacks and protecting Ethan when he moved to assist others. For the first time, she felt what it was like to fight alongside someone who did not just follow orders but thought, planned, and acted with purpose. Ethan's movements were calculated, defensive yet daring. He used the fortress's energy channels to redirect blasts and create barriers. Lyrae watched him in awe. Humans were supposed to be weaker, slower, less capable, yet here he was, facing superior forces and holding his ground with intelligence and courage. During a brief lull, she turned to him, her voice almost a whisper. "Why aren't you afraid even now?" Ethan smiled faintly, though his body was bruised and bloodied. "Because I have chosen to act. Fear does not dictate my actions. And because I believe you can be better than the fear that controls you." Her chest tightened. His words were not just about survival. They were about something deeper, something personal. For the first time, she questioned her own path, her own choices, and the way her people measured strength. The battle reached its climax when a massive Velithran assault unit broke through the outer defenses. Lyrae and Ethan stood back to back, facing overwhelming odds. She expected him to falter, to retreat, but he did not. He met each attack with calm precision, shielding her when necessary, directing her movements with quiet commands. And in that moment, something shifted. Lyrae realized that the human she had been trained to fear, the one she had seen as fragile and inferior, was in fact stronger in ways she had never understood. Not in muscle or weaponry, but in courage, compassion, and unwavering resolve. When the battle ended, the attackers retreating or incapacitated, both were exhausted, wounded, and covered in dust and sand. Lyrae looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of respect, admiration, and something she did not yet name. I do not understand you," she said softly. Ethan shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "You do not need to understand. You need only to see the choice before you. Choose courage over fear. Choose hope over despair. That is how strength grows." She lowered her weapon, feeling a strange relief wash over her. The lessons he taught were simple yet profound. Her people had long equated strength with fear, control, and dominance. Yet here was proof that another way existed, a way that allowed beings to survive, to act, and to rise even in impossible circumstances. As dawn broke over the violet sands, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink, Lyrae pressed her insignia into his hand. It was a symbol of her authority, of the fear she had once wielded, and now a symbol of trust. "You have changed me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not with words, but with your courage." Ethan accepted the symbol, his expression calm yet understanding of its weight. "Then perhaps it is time for you to see a new path," he replied. They walked together toward the horizon side by side, two warriors from different worlds united by choice, courage, and understanding. The violet sands stretched endlessly before them, but for the first time Lyrae felt a sense of hope she had never known. And Ethan, ever calm, ever steadfast, knew that the human spirit had not only survived but had inspired a warrior to rise beyond fear. The wind whispered through the dunes, carrying the scent of change and the promise of a new day. And in that quiet moment, two beings, one human, one alien, understood that courage was not measured by the size of one's weapon or the fear one could instill, but by the choices one made in the face of impossible odds. Lyrae glanced at Ethan once more, her voice soft and breathless. "Why aren't you afraid, human?" He smiled faintly, looking at the rising sun. "Because some things are worth facing no matter the danger, and you are one of them." For the first time she realized that strength could be gentle, bravery could be quiet, and hope could shine brighter than any weapon. Together they walked into the sunrise, leaving behind fear, leaving behind the battlefield, and stepping into a future now neither had expected but both were ready to face.